I'm a life coach and mentor with Creative Pathways Coaching. The website is down below in the description. It has some handy resources. That's where you can book a one-on-one coaching with me. So there's a lot to cover in this video today, and if you haven't already, please like and subscribe below to see future content. I put a video out every week. And please stick around to the end of the video. I'll be teaching you a technique that will help you to get in touch with your intuition. Tip 1, connection versus no connection. That's fairly self-explanatory, really. The most common situation in a first date is that there's no connection, and also it can be very awkward and sometimes unpleasant. The last two are pretty obvious, that there's not going to be a second date, but the first one can confuse a lot of people, and they will tend to then try other dates just to be sure. So there's some theory out there that even though there's not a connection at the start, that means that maybe after a while there will be. I don't know. Look, I call bullshit on that one. I'm not a fan of, of pushing something that just isn't there from the start. And that's for most people anyway. You can get to know someone that you don't have a connection with, but that's more about familiarity rather than an actual connection. I'm a bit of a believer, if there's no connection at the start, move on. But that doesn't mean that they may not end up being a friend or an acquaintance. So, that one's up to you, really. Okay, look, disclaimer here. I'm sure there are people out there who are very much in love with their partners who at first didn't have a connection with right at the start, but that's fairly few and far between. For some people, they need to have a friendship bond before they can progress onwards towards an intimate relationship. So in that circumstance, most people like that, or people like that, tend to not do very well on first dates because it takes quite a while to develop a friendship bond before it can go further for them. So certainly in that circumstance, it's probably not applicable. You may sometimes with people on the first date feel a more of a friendship bond rather than a sexual or a love connection there, and in that circumstance, hey, look, I would suggest second, third date, see where that goes, because generally for a long-lasting relationship you need to be friends. So I think it's important to actually look at that and see whether that has potential to go anything further. Tip 2, chemistry. Take it slow. I know, so you're feeling it, you're just there going, oh yeah. Firstly, does the other person? Observe them and see. And don't confuse politeness and being nice with interest. So be very clear that, that person is feeling it back. That involves using your intuition, which we'll talk about at the end of this video. So take notice of their words, but also particularly take notice of their actions. That is where you tend to see where a person's interest is. Their actions really are quite telling as to what their interests actually are. But regardless of that, regardless even of whether they're interested back and it's a reciprocal thing, take it slow. If it's appropriate, say that you want to see them again, you're interested in seeing again, but just, don't make it for tomorrow or maybe even the day after. Maybe in a couple of days, maybe even just give it almost a week before you set up the second date. A lot of that has to do with the fact that you don't want to come across as needy or put too much pressure right at the start. So just, if appropriate, let them know you're interested, definitely. The next step, the second date, make it 3 or 4 days after the first date. And then, again, meet somewhere casually, take it easy. Because even particularly so if it's a sexual connection, you particularly want to take it easy. But it's more about just taking it slow and not putting the pressure too much on that connection and seeing where it goes. Now, if there's a sexual connection straight away and it's very strong, and yes, I think we've all been there, don't fall prey to this need. Like, I know it's very strong. So yeah, when you feel a connection with someone, you want to be with them a lot. And it is very tempting just to make a date the next day. And then, you know, to see them for lunch, and then to see them for dinner, and then I would say hold off on this. You need to be a little bit objective. And the same thing happens when it comes to sex. I really would suggest not having sex straight away. I know it sounds like I'm a prude, and I'm not. And I've been in the circumstance where I've had, you know, sexual relations a little bit sooner than probably I should have. And yeah, look what happens in that scenario, and I think we've all been there if we really think about it. But what's known as, or what I call, the sex haze, where you get together with someone, you have sex a bit too soon, you actually don't know them that well, but if the sex is really good, that tends to put a sort of a bit of a glaze or a haze over how you see them. So you're not very objective. So suddenly, you know, 3-4 months down the track, when the haze starts to clear, you look at them and realize you've actually had almost nothing in common with them, and there's actually things about them that you don't like at all. So I'd really suggest take it easy, take it slow, don't have sex straight away. The other person might actually be interested in you. You can feel it, you can feel the connection. You go to organize a second date, they cancel for some reason, you connect again and make connections for another date, they cancel again. Sometimes what happens is, even if initially someone is interested in you, there might be circumstances within their life that make it so that they step back. And that could be because of other people. It could be because of their own issues with intimacy. It could be a lot of things, their own fears. So if they're ghosting you or breadcrumbing you, which, you know, is fairly common in this scenario, if you've had sex with them too early, or if you've had a connection with them too early and you haven't taken it slow, you're going to feel more rejected. So this is where you take care of yourself a little bit here and just take it slow, take it easy. Allow the fact that if you have a connection, that other person may not want to jump in as quickly as you and may step back very quickly as well. So that protects you. It gives you an objective look to see what's actually going on, and B, more importantly, who they actually are before the sex haze hits. Tip 3, obvious incompatibility. It's fairly obvious. You're talking to them and you're talking about traveling overseas in the next couple of months, and they haven't ever left their hometown and they're happy to stay where they are. You know, that's wanting different futures. You know, you have kids or want kids and the thought hasn't even crossed their mind. You know, that's again different futures and different priorities too. They talk about their job like it's their life, whereas you are incredibly focused on your social life. Different values, different priorities. So it's fairly obvious, and it's interesting, some people get together when it's very clear, particularly when there's different futures. There is an expectation out there that the other person will fall in love with them so much that they'll change their perspective and they will not want to travel, or, you know, want to travel. So these are obvious signs of incompatibility, and it's amazing how people go out with people where it's very clear that there's an incompatibility. Because even though there may be that further down the track, of course you get to know someone, you get to know other things about them, like their money styles, and there may be an incompatibility there. Values, there may be an incompatibility there. Sexual styles, there might be an incompatibility there. So if there's an incompatibility right at the start, I would suggest that you step away. Further down the track there might be even more, and then you might end up in a relationship that is ultimately incompatible. And again, we'll talk about that in future videos. Tip 4, red flags. Again, look, fairly obvious danger signal there. Just don't go there, really. If we think about red flags, most of the time we think about the obvious ones, but say for example on a first date, a red flag would be Most people on a first date are out to impress each other. So if someone turns up and they're late, they're not dressed very well, they're not that interested in you or don't really try, that is a red flag within itself. And again, if they're late, I would consider that a red flag. If it's taken a while to get them out on a date, you know, you've called up or you've messaged each other and they've been busy and it's taken a month, maybe even more so, to get out on a date, that's a red flag. That means you're not a great priority there, whether you're not a great priority or their love life is not a great priority. Talking about themselves the whole time, that's not exactly. That could be that they're so nervous and they so want to impress you, and they might be a little bit insecure. So yeah, that's a bit of a, you know, maybe, but you know, sometimes it can be. I think you've got to use your intuition on that part. Talking about their ex. In itself, if they made reference to their ex, you know, say for example, they said, oh yeah, my ex and I saw that play 6 months ago. I really liked it, but he didn't. That's okay. When they're constantly talking about their ex, that's a red flag. You sometimes won't even get any on the first date, but those would be the couple that you would, and maybe even more. But rule of thumb here, if you're not comfortable, if there's something that doesn't feel right, that means your intuition is telling you something. That means no. I'll actually talk about red flags a lot more in future videos in this series, but I do want to say red flags start at the first date, of course. They tend to become more obvious with time. So although you might be able to pick up on something on the first date or the first couple of dates, this is something you've got to watch for the next at least couple of months of seeing someone. And if we're not very good at dealing with relationships or our intuition, we tend to ignore them. Okay, we're on to the last tip, tip 5. Communicate. Do you want the same thing? Right at the start, if you're meeting through friends or it's something you bumped into each other, this can be a little bit harder to do. When you're on a date through a dating app, it's less so, but be clear about what you want. You want a relationship? Be clear on the first date with them. And I'm actually looking for a relationship, so I just want to, you know, get on the same page here. If you're not, that's okay. Something like that, and that's sort of what you want to do. What it does is it makes it clear for the other person, and you know, if the other person is just only interested in a casual thing, then that, you know, you're not wasting your time there. And the same thing happens if you happen to be interested in sex, although if you're watching this video, then I would imagine that you're more interested in a relationship than sex. But really being clear right from the start. And sometimes it's hard to do that, to be very clear, but to say, look, I am interested in a relationship. This is where I'm looking at. If you're only interested in something casual, this might not be something that could work. This is actually quite good because it leads to a very healthy dynamic in the relationship where there is very honest and straightforward conversation right from the start. If it continues on and you both want the same thing, then it gives the opening to be more straightforward. Now I'm going to teach you a technique to get in touch with your intuition. This is called asking and receiving. This is a simple tool and it's pretty easy, and it's helpful if you have meditated in the past or you're quite a regular meditator, because it does involve being able to step into meditation quite quickly. So find a quiet place, sit down and write your question in a journal or on a piece of paper. Repeat that question a couple of times, then close your eyes and repeat it in your head a couple of times, and then lightly meditate for a while. Sometimes when you first do it, the answer won't come, but with time it will. I've gotten to a stage now that I can actually ask the question and within less than a minute I can receive an answer. So this is something to practice and something to work towards, but it's definitely a good way to get in touch with your intuition. So if you like this video, please like or subscribe down below. Also as well, if you've got any feedback with regards to what I spoke about or any suggestions for future content, please put it down in the comments below, and I will see you next week. Alright, cheers, bye.